August is an impactful month, astrologically speaking, with a new moon in Leo that kickstarted a Mercury retrograde. This Mercury retrograde not only changes direction, it changes signs. Whenever Mercury retrograde changes signs, it indicates a major change of mind, heart, or direction on something. This third Mercury retrograde of 2024 covers the territory of the humility and grace of Virgo and the courage and bombacity of Leo. So Mercury slowed down and stationed what we call retrograde under the Leo new moon on August 4th, 2024, beginning in the very early degrees of Virgo, lasting until August 28th, and retrograding all the way back, ending in the third final decan of Leo. Since Mercury retrograde covers two signs, both Virgo and Leo, the themes of both signs will play out in the forefront of our collective minds. There will be deep connections to Venus, which is co-present and even conjunct Mercury retrograde during the beginning of the retrograde in Virgo, bringing us all the way back to 2023, reviewing both Venus retrograde in Leo, July through September 2023, and Mercury retrograde through Virgo from August 23rd to September 14th, 2023. We will be reviewing and reflecting on our habits, schedules, work-life balance, and routines, and how that manifests through our physical health, Virgo, and on the ways that we have allowed fear or insecurity to block us from reaching our full potential, or have in any way given our power away to other people by allowing them to, even for a second, dim our light, Leo. So I'll ask you again, do you have the courage to be seen and heard? Do you have the courage to truly be seen, wholly and openly, authentically? Let's take a closer look and break it down. We'll begin by explaining what a Mercury retrograde is and some archetypes for the planet Mercury and the signs that Mercury rules, Gemini and Virgo. Astronomically, Mercury is the fastest moving planet and the closest planet to the Sun. So Mercury retrograde is essentially an optical illusion when Mercury moves more slowly than the Earth does around the Sun and their respective orbits. We'll begin by explaining what a Mercury retrograde is and some archetypes for the planet Mercury and the signs that Mercury rules, Gemini and Virgo. Astronomically, Mercury is the fastest moving planet, and Mercury usually orbits the Sun faster than the Earth orbits the Sun, but during a retrograde, or when it appears to stop, station, and then move backward, this is actually because the Earth is catching up to it, much like two runners on a track. It's relevant because astrology was created based on observations of the behavior of the stars through the naked eye from our Earth-based perspective. And this was long before modern technology or the advent of the telescope. Practicing astrology has nothing to do with believing that one is the center of one's universe. And it has everything to do with what we perceive and how our perception can, and very much does, shape our 3D reality. The planet Mercury got its name from the Roman god of commerce, communication, and travel. In Greek, Mercury is the winged messenger Hermes, who traveled back and forth, delivering messages from the gods in Mount Olympus, representing higher consciousness, and Pluto, Hades, in the underworld, representing the depths of our psyches. Astrologically, Mercury is the messenger planet of communication, travel, and commerce, ruling over fraternal twin energies, Gemini and Virgo, mutable air and mutable earth, respectively, delivering messages from the Sun and to the underworld, our unconscious minds. So Mercury and the Earth both orbit the Sun. But because Mercury's orbit is much shorter than the Earth's, Mercury is about 88 days versus our 365, Mercury laps the Earth 3 to 4 times a year. And when all of those planets are close together, this is what we perceive as a retrograde. When it happens, it's similar to when we're watching the Olympics and how a faster runner appears to move backwards whilst overtaking a slower runner running around a track. It's the perception, not reality, of it traveling backwards, which is why it's a symbolic time of reflection. So similarly, from our Earth-based perspective, Mercury appears to stop and then station retrograde, or travel backwards, reversing its course 3 to 4 times a year. Because Mercury does not actually stand still, stop moving, or travel backwards, it's an optical illusion that we call Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde, therefore, is a symbolic time of reflection on all things tied to Mercury: travel, commerce, communication. Mercury retrograde is not a bad thing. It happens 3 to 4 times a year, which is pretty frequent. Unless you were born during a Mercury retrograde, which will affect you opposite the rest of the collective, it's time to mimic our perceived motion of Mercury, stop, slow down, and practice the R's of Mercury retrograde. Unless you were born during a Mercury retrograde or it's coinciding with a Mercury cazimi, Mercury retrograde is not a time to start or launch anything brand new, but it's instead a fantastic opportunity to dot the I's, cross the T's, and wrap up something. We might be revisiting old creative projects that we allowed life to get in the way of and distract us from completing. All too often, we can allow the busyness of life to distract us from our deepest passions and what's most important. So Mercury retrograde, especially one in the sign of Leo, is a perfect opportunity to return to them. Mercury retrograde is a perfect time to remember that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. We can and should listen far more often than we speak, and reflect on our communication habits, especially with Mars activating Jupiter by conjunction in Gemini, So we're seeing a lot of shadow Gemini, a lot of gossip, a lot of Mars there, Mars in Gemini, a lot of speaking before thinking. It can be a little bit impulsive with its words, and it can weaponize. Weaponized polarity, I think, would be another thing. And then the weaponization of intellect and words is another big thing with Mars in Gemini. Jupiter, they're expanding the energy and influence. The shadow of Mars in Gemini tends to dominate the conversation, focusing more on preparing what they're going to say next than on actually listening and engaging in the conversation. Trust me, as a natal Mars conjunct Moon in Gemini, I get it. A younger, less evolved version of me definitely used her intellect and words as a weapon. And adversaries never saw it coming beneath a sweet, charming, Libra rising persona. Something I've also noticed with this placement is what I like to call the shame boomerang, where maybe in the moment saying something feels good, but you're hit with, I guess, shame later. I've seen that with a few of my clients with Mars in Gemini. Be very mindful of your words and actions, because the things you think, write, and say very much affect your 3D reality here on Earth. To quote Tyler Childers, "Keep in mind that a man is just as good as his word. It takes twice as long to build bridges you've burned. And there's hurt you can cause that time alone cannot heal. Keep your nose on the grindstone and out of the pills." Nose on the grindstone, Tyler Childers. All right, let's talk a little about this Magician cards. This is the Alchemist. In the traditional Rider-Waite, there is a masculine character, we'll just say, at a table with all four of the elements. There's a wand. There's all four of the elements are there. So symbolizing mankind's ability, doesn't matter how you identify, but mankind as a whole, every person, our ability to alchemize using the four elements and what's available to us. The Magician has a lot to do with Mercury and Gemini energy, focused, also Virgo, but focused on your thoughts and how your thoughts are seeds that affect how we respond and react to things. And if it's coming from a place of intention, aligned with integrity, we can usually rest assured that it's in the right spot. But when we give in to impulsivity, or when it becomes like a shadow energy, we can start to manifest more negative things via karma in our reality. And that's how we can tell if we're on or off track. She is creating, and this, it's a cloaked feminine figure, creating, well, presumed, I actually don't know, I can't tell for sure, creating the infinity symbol with what they're alchemizing as they're completely focused in a meditative state. So stay grounded. And it's also trickster energy, so this energy can be, I mean, it's pretty clever. So a negative side of that, and then if there's any, like, throw in any, like, of power, there can be a potential to manipulate, especially if you can intellectualize or understand what you're working with and like what their weaknesses might be. I could see shadow Magician energy being a bit manipulative. Beginning in the sign of Virgo, this will very much serve opportunities for us to reflect on our health, daily habits, work-life balance, overall schedules, and routines, possibly even the work we do or how we're of service to our greater community. We'll also take a look at the ways we practice or embody the traits of humility or hubris, and the ways we integrate either our spiritual or religious beliefs, some value system, into our 3D reality. Virgo energy is the maiden, spirit embodied on Earth. Ending in the sign of Leo, this will challenge us to take a long, hard look at the many ways we allow doubt, fear, insecurity, etc. to hold us back from our full potential, and how we may give our power away to others by allowing their negative projections or expectations to dim our light. This Mercury retrograde began on August 4th, 2024, 4 degrees, 6 arc minutes, Virgo, under the Leo new moon, 2024, and it will station direct 21 degrees, 25 arc minutes of Leo on August 28th. We've actually been feeling the effects for some time already, because 2 weeks prior to Mercury stationing retrograde, this happens every Mercury retrograde, there is a pre-shadow period. As soon as Mercury retrograde reaches the degree point where it will ultimately station direct at the very end of Mercury retrograde, that is when we are said to have entered pre-retrograde shadow period. So on July 16th, 2024, when Mercury reached 21 degrees, 25 arc minutes of Leo, our pre-retrograde shadow period began. Similarly, once Mercury stations direct, 21 degrees, 25 arc minutes of Leo on August 28th, 2024, it'll take about 2 weeks for Mercury to recover its course one final time moving direct to catch back up to that initial point where Mercury retrograde began. Back on August 4th, 4 degrees, 6 arc minutes of Virgo. Mercury will return to 4 degrees, 6 arc minutes of Virgo on September 11th, 2024, thus bringing us out of Mercury retrograde's post-shadow period, which always falls around 2 weeks after each Mercury retrograde. So you may be feeling more clarity by the end of August, but you won't be fully in the clear until September 11th. It's a tough one, but should be easy to remember. Mercury is exalted in Virgo. You might remember we had a Mercury retrograde, or maybe you didn't because it wasn't terribly notable, at least for me personally. We had a Mercury retrograde to begin and end in the sign of Virgo that was relatively smooth, and that was back in 2023, August 23rd, 2023 to September 14th, 2023. And this is because Mercury is exalted in Virgo, so it is at its very best. So this was especially gentle in the beginning towards that Leo new moon, and in the first week of August when Mercury retrograde aligned with one of the great benefics, Venus, in the early degrees of Virgo. So it's a very gentle start to Mercury retrograde. Even though that Mercury retrograde through Virgo of 2023 seemed smooth at the time, many of the seeds and decisions that were made back then are actually affecting our reality right now. I'll leave you with some pointers for how to best work with the energy. Remember the R's of Mercury retrograde. Revisit, reflect, review, rewind, reconsider, rest, retreat. There is no fear-mongering on this channel. You all have free will. Astrology merely serves as a blueprint, showing you potential through your natal chart, through transit charts, and through chart progressions. And it shows you how to work with the current energy of the cosmos. But ultimately, you have free will. Similarly, Mercury retrograde is only what you make of it. If you get all in your head, you allow fear, insecurity, doubt, analysis paralysis, overthinking, perseveration, rumination, full-blown anxiety, all of these terms, to take over. That would be overactive Virgo or overactive Gemini. It'll manifest in your reality, and it'll be a very anxious reality. If you choose to see Mercury retrograde as a positive opportunity to not only be more mindful, but to reflect on your communication patterns and habits, to remember that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth, then this will be a very positive experience for you. Mercury retrograde, much like life, is entirely what you make of it. Things in this life will happen that are beyond your control. So control the controllables. How prepared are you? And most importantly, how do you respond to circumstances? Especially with Mercury retrograde beginning in Virgo, preparedness is next to godliness. Virgo is the sign of the maiden, or the earth goddess. It's about integrating your set of values and your intentions into your being. It's about being spirit embodied, living with integrity. The root word for Virgo, vir, comes from strong, as in self-contained. So you're advised to embody the traits of Virgo, especially the positive traits. Self-sufficiency, commitment or dedication to being of service to humanity or the local community in some way. I've noticed a lot of Virgo risings tend to work with their hands. Commitment to self-care through consistent routines, especially as they relate to work, health, nutrition, and exercise. Practicing discernment, personal responsibility, detail orientation, and humility. Setting oneself up for success through organizing and planning, but also being flexible and understanding that life doesn't go according to our meticulously thought out plans. Watch for criticizing, nitpicking, overanalyzing leading to analysis paralysis, and perfectionism. Also look out for the 4 horsemen of modern society being amplified by the Mars-Jupiter conjunction in Gemini. Those are instant gratification, shortened attention spans, procrastination, and exhaustion, probably from the first 3. Mercury retrograde into Leo, especially the latter part of Mercury retrograde, when the Sun is in Virgo, beginning August 23rd, and Mercury is in Leo, putting Mercury and the Sun into mutual reception, or cahoots. The combination of Virgo and Leo, and it's a beautiful energy when learned to balance, brings discernment and humility, and a down-to-earth practicality to Leo's magnetic, alluring, charming, and fiery ego energy. We, the collective, are challenged to bridge the gap between these neighboring energies of Leo and Virgo. This will feel familiar to anyone born on the cusps of Leo and Virgo, or has personal placements there, in the late degrees of Leo, early degrees of Virgo, last few days of Leo season, first few days of Virgo season. Leo sustains fire and the ego, so this is all about the core of it coming from having the courage to be seen and heard authentically as the individual you are. And it's often our eccentricities that make us shine. So have the courage to share them with others. No more hiding your true or authentic self or feelings out of fear of rejection, abandonment, or public ridicule. No more becoming attached to or dependent on external sources of validation. And instead, focus on fortifying an independent intrinsic source of validation, such as pursuing a passion project or fostering greater personal accountability. Having a consistent little side hustle was a great benefit to pursuing, starting, and launching this astrology channel, but it's not ultimately why I set out to do it, completely by chance. There were many reasons why I ultimately sat down in front of a camera. One of them was that I knew it would force growth in personal charisma and reduce stage fright. I knew that over time, via exposure therapy, I would eventually get used to it and maybe even come into loving the process of filming, overcoming my own fears of being seen and heard authentically for who I am and what I'm most interested in here on a very public platform, without fear of rejection or public ridicule, or even criticism. Virgo. I really started this channel for two main reasons. One was personal accountability. I knew that by committing to producing bi-monthly videos, they've now evolved into video series, for each new and full moon, then it would keep me accountable in my own learning. You are never done learning astrology. There is always another deeper layer to dig into. And I think that's what I love most about astrology, is that I'm never bored. I am always continuing the learning process. So I knew that if I committed to putting out new moon and full moon videos, one, I could reflect on that new moon 6 months later by linking back that video from 6 months prior. And two, continue my own dedication to really living with the astrology by having a commitment to the public to putting out content. The second most important reason I started this channel was to create a community, somewhere where it's safe, and we're safe, to openly discuss astrology, astrological transits, how that may manifest in our future if we want to play around with it with predictive astrology. A place to discuss natal placements, to ask one another questions. Because when I went through my own dark night of the soul, it was the comments section, and I always say the comments section is like a gold mine. That is one of the best places to get an understanding of how a collective, at least a collective audience for what you're watching, thinks. And it's ripe with valuable advice, feedback, and questions. It's time to break down the walls that may have been keeping us safe, but ultimately limit us by blocking us from connecting from the heart. Leo is all about that inner child, so we're unlearning habits of dimming our own light so as to not outshine a sibling or a parent. Shine your light unapologetically, but also watch for the trappings of Leo, the shadow of Leo. Leo energy, when taken too far, I'll just be very direct. It can be very loud. It can be a little arrogant. It can miss the mark in assertiveness and lead to being domineering. It can be a little my way or the highway and a little bit too self-focused. And you'll notice this will manifest negatively in its relationships because people don't really tolerate that energy. I've noticed with the fixed signs, they tend to be more on the taking side than on the giving side, with Aquarius being the only exception there. Just something I've noticed, fire signs tend to be very good at putting the self first, which is great and healthy, but to an extent. When it starts to negatively impact your relationships, when you have issues with negotiating, compromising, asserting yourself to the point where you're not domineering or aggressive or arrogant, those would be fire energy imbalanced or imbalanced masculine. Here are some affirmations for the Mercury retrograde through Virgo and Leo. Today I live for myself. I am the master of my own life. Today I release all past grudges and resentments because I know they hold me back from attracting positivity in the present. Today and every day I add positive energy to the collective. When I err, I know that tomorrow brings a new dawn. I can always begin again. Let's review some important dates. July 16th, 2024. Mercury pre-shadow retrograde period began. While it wasn't full-blown Mercury retrograde just yet, clues are often presented like breadcrumbs, presenting themes for the upcoming Mercury retrograde. On August 4th, 2024, we had the new moon in Leo, and just after the new moon in Leo, Mercury stationed retrograde 4 degrees 6 arc minutes Virgo. On August 7th, Mercury retrograde conjoined great benefic Venus, albeit fallen, in the sign of Virgo in the early degrees, 3 degrees of Virgo, and 3 degrees is a Gemini degree. So tying in Mars and Jupiter in Gemini and how all of that is squaring off against Saturn. Mercury retrograde conjunct Venus was ideal energy for apologizing or giving forgiveness or second chances. On August 14th, Mercury returns to the critical 29th anaretic, that energy of Pluto, Tower moment, 29 degrees Leo. This is on top of fixed star Regulus, so it's loud and bombastic energy. Cue more chaos and drama, and pay attention to people in Hollywood and leadership as secrets or skeletons get exposed from the closet. August 14th coincides with the exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter in Gemini. On August 18th, that's the time I'm recording this video, Mercury Cazimi, the alignment of Mercury retrograde and the Sun, 26 degrees Leo, where the Sun and Mercury align. Mercury gets so close to the Sun, it burns up, it's combust, and then it's said to be reborn, the benefits of which we can tap into in the days surrounding Mercury Cazimi. This also means that Mercury is squaring Uranus. Mercury and Leo square Uranus and Taurus now for the second time. We have a third coming up as well. And it's coinciding with the mutable T-square between Venus opposite Saturn So she was conjoined with Mercury in the early degrees of Virgo. Now she's at the 18th degree of Virgo, opposite Saturn in Pisces, which is squaring off against Mars activating Jupiter in Gemini, in the heart of that center middle degrees of Gemini. On August 24th, Mercury retrograde sextile Mars. So we'll have Mars activating via sextile. They're working together. So perhaps as we're reflecting, we're coming into consciousness, something activated by Mars, some sort of karmic news on August 24th, a message coming in, an apology maybe. And then end of August, August 28th, Mercury will station direct 21 degrees, 25 arc minutes of Leo. 2 weeks later, on September 11th, Mercury will leave its post-retrograde shadow period. So again, Mercury direct, you may be feeling clear, but you're not totally in the clear yet. Mercury post-retrograde shadow period ends once Mercury, stationing direct 21 degrees, 25 arc minutes Leo, has had some time to retrace its steps now that it's moving forward, reborn after that Mercury cazimi. It needs about 2 weeks to practice those intentions that it set and to work out the kinks in its new routine and to really embody it. So just have some grace and patience and wait until September 11th. Those final 2 weeks are the ideal time to dot the I's, cross the T's, and polish something off that you can share and broadcast come mid-September. I'll give you some tried and true Mercury retrograde advice. Watch your mindset, back up your devices, make sure your passwords are secure, double check all of your email and text message correspondence, verify senders, verify you're saying what you intend to say, proofread, slow down, rest, and reflect. I had a memory pop in, so I'm just going to share this little story with you. I actually, if I can find it and dig it up, I'll put it as a picture-in-picture, but it's a screenshot of an email when I used to have a corporate job, and I'll block out the names and everything. This poor soul. So they had opened a call center in Florida, and we had no idea, fortunately, who this individual was, of like a company of like 800 people. And she meant to email her manager. They meant to email their manager, I guess explaining why they were back from the bathroom after an excessively long amount of time. You don't have to explain. If that happens, you don't have to explain yourself. They accidentally emailed the entire company. So I came back from a marketing lunch, and this was February 2020, right before all the chaos ensued, the pandemic-related chaos, that is. I was in Center City for a marketing lunch with vendors in from Sweden. And I come back, and I check my email. It was so hard not to laugh. Plan ample time and leave early, especially when commuting and traveling, as there will be delays. You might have noticed a lot of construction. It always happens this time of the year, at least where I live, because it's cooler at night, so they can get a lot of work done on the roads. And schools aren't in session yet until after Labor Day. Double check all of your bookings. A good Virgo rule of thumb is to plan to arrive 10 to 15 minutes early. You want to reverse engineer how early you need to get up, how early you need to leave the house, buffer in some time for traffic and an obstacle that you don't see coming, especially with all this energy to Uranus. Unforeseen obstacles will ensue. Reverse engineer what time it takes for you to get there 10 to 15 minutes early. Preparedness is next to godliness, remember? Plus, nobody wants to start their day from an energy of just rolling out of bed, feeling unmotivated, or rushing, running late, and carrying that anxiety or anger or whatever negative energy into the rest of our day. Nobody wants that. So give yourself the gift of having extra space cushioned into your travel plans. Think happy thoughts. Speak only elevating words about other people, especially if they're not with you. Be very careful about gossip. Shadow Gemini is prone to gossip, and this is being expanded, activated by Mars and expanded by Jupiter there. What we say about other people always invariably gets back to them, and it comes back to you in the form of karma. Try your best to follow the golden rules. If you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. It costs 0 energy to simply stay silent. Always think, is it helpful, productive, and kind? And then also think about the delivery. And be mindful of multitasking. With all this amplified Gemini energy, multitasking is a myth and it's a lie. You cannot be fully present for multiple things simultaneously. Now I will tell you there are certain things that you can multitask, and it's because they require part of your brain function and not the full brain function. So I could talk on the phone and go through my clothing, preferably if I have like AirPods on. That would be a thing where I could try on clothing, discern if I still want it or not, and still be engaged in the conversation, possibly even bringing their opinion into it now and then. Those are 2 tasks that I could juggle together. This Mercury retrograde will affect the entire collective, and I'll explain why. Those of us who are highly influenced by Mercury, Virgo and Gemini placements, especially Virgo and Gemini stelliums, Virgo and Gemini rising, Virgo or Gemini on the midheaven, or an important angle, or those who have Mercury rising with their ascendant, like myself, are especially used to Mercury retrograde. We've typically noticed the pattern of chaos emerging seemingly out of nowhere through time, throughout our lives. Mercury retrograde always affects me heavily, and I'll use my own birth chart to explain why. We can see that I am a Libra rising, which means that my chart ruler is in Libra, here in the 12th house, conjunct Mercury. When two planets are in close conjunction, they are essentially fused and work very closely together. Additionally, Venus and Mercury happen to be the two most heavily aspected planets in my chart, adding to their strength and influence. We can also see that the two are conjoined in my 12th house, rising with my ascendant, while also loosely conjunct my Sun in the 1st house, meaning that all of these energies converge together via conjunction and contribute not only to my persona, but my life path. Now, to take it a step deeper, we'll need to look at the signs and houses ruled by Mercury, and therefore affected heavily by a Mercury retrograde. Because I have 12 degrees Libra as my ascendant, that's the precise degree and constellation that was rising the instant I took my first breath here on Earth. This means 12 degrees Libra means that each of my houses falls into signs. So I have Gemini, Mercury-ruled Gemini placements in both my 8th and 9th houses, and Virgo falling predominantly in my 11th and 12th houses. If you factor in the asteroids, I technically have a Gemini stellium, consisting of my Vesta. Gemini is a dominant energy in my family. One of my brothers is a Gemini. I have my natal moon conjunct my Mars, big Gemini energy, and Psyche, all in Gemini. I know and love a Gemini. I even look like a Gemini. I'm fun-sized, youthful, childlike, and energetic. So Mercury rules my 9th house and my 12th houses. We aren't quite done yet, though. We need to then examine my natal Mercury placement, because Mercury would be the planetary ruler of all of those placements. Because my natal Mercury is in Libra, conjunct Venus in Libra, a very strong energy, it's under the planetary influence of Venus in Libra. So all of my Virgo and Gemini placements will therefore also have a strong Libran energy or flavor to them. To take it even further, you have to look at the chart as a whole collection of patterns, factoring in the aspects, trines, sextiles, squares, oppositions, to other planetary bodies and important angles like the ascendant, descendant, IC, or nadir, and the midheaven on your chart. So you can rest assured that I don't make it through a single Mercury retrograde unscathed, though some are better than others. Enough about me, though. Let's dive into the nitty-gritty so you can better understand how and where this Mercury retrograde may be affecting you, especially halfway through and coming out of Mercury cazimi. The rising signs that are the most affected by this Mercury retrograde are Gemini and Virgo, because your ruling planet is Mercury. Leo rising would be impacted next, and this is because Mercury is retrograding through your sign, especially the third final last 10 degrees. Libra and Taurus rising. Your ruling planet is Venus, and she's not only debilitated or weakened in the sign of Virgo, but she's answering to Virgo's ruling planet, which is Mercury retrograde. Aries and Scorpio rising. Your ruling planet is Mars. Mars is in Gemini. Gemini answers to Mercury, and Mercury is retrograde, so you will also feel this significantly. Sagittarius and Pisces rising. Your traditional planetary ruler is Jupiter. Jupiter is in Gemini. Gemini answers to Mercury, and Mercury is retrograde. Cancer rising. You are moon ruled. You will be heavily influenced by all the lunar phases, but especially the Aquarius full moon on August 19th, coinciding with both Mercury cazimi and several challenging T-squares. Capricorn and Aquarius rising. You are traditionally ruled by Saturn, which is featured in a harsh opposition to Venus, fallen weakened in Virgo, activated under the Aquarius full moon on August 19th. And that's everyone.